is my review of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Okay, so in this episode, Giorno actually starts his test to actually join the organization, who we learn a bit more about from Burchiardi at the start. We learn a bit more of it about it from Bruno at the start of the episode, and he kind of explains what it is. So it starts off with the scene from the end of the last episode where Giorno expresses his desire to become a gangster to Bruno, and Bruno, throughout the entire back end of this episode, there's actually a group of kids playing soccer, and during this conversation, they're playing soccer in the background. They accidentally kick a ball in between Giorno and Bruno, and they're a little bit scared because obviously Bruno's a gangster. He's a little scary, but Bruno then kicks the ball back to them, much to their surprise and joy, and then he expresses his interest to actually help Giorno fulfill that goal, but does point out that he is indeed on his own if the boss finds out that Giorno is trying to take him on. So yeah, and with that, he then proceeds to take Giorno to meet one of the higher ups of his organization, which he reveals is actually called Passione, or the Passion. It's named after the band of the same name, but it is Passione. He then proceeds to explain how Passione works, about how yes, it is a criminal organization with several different key members. Although, interestingly enough, according to Bruno, nobody's met the boss. Nobody's met the head of Passione yet at all, and which is a very odd thing. As he points out, he doesn't reveal his full name. He doesn't show anybody who he is, and for the most part, he just kind of operates through his various underbosses. But case in point, Bruno then proceeds to explain that they're actually not going to be meeting with he's not going to be meeting with the boss directly, but rather with one of the other underbosses, a man named Polpo. As we find out, Polpo was arrested and won't be for some crime that's completely unspecified, and he likely won't be out of prison for another 15 years. But he does go on to explain how the man could very easily, how Polpo is basically in prison by choice. So as we find out, Polpo could very easily escape from prison and go back to Passione, but he doesn't. As Bruno explains, he just kind of stays there because he can. And Giorno is a little curious as to why, but he then proceeds to kind of change the subject to ask how Bruno actually became a stand user, pointing out that since that he clearly knows what stands are and clearly knows the proper term for them, but is a little confused as to how he actually gained the stand himself. And Bruno explains that all of Giorno's questions will actually be answered once he actually goes to meet Polpo. So with that, Giorno then proceeds to enter the prison by himself and starts going through the security checks and the security searches to actually get into the prison. And eventually, after dropping off his belongings and receiving a pat down from one of the female guards, the woman then explains to Giorno that the rules behind Polpo's prison, and how he's not allowed to touch it. He's not allowed to touch the glass that separates himself from Polpo. He's not allowed to take or give anything to or from Polpo. And when Giorno expresses confusion over why he's meeting Polpo in his cell and not in a visitor's room, the guard merely explains that he clearly doesn't know who Polpo is, and then proceeds to escort Giorno to his cell and lets him in. At which point Giorno enters Polpo's cell, and it is surprisingly nice for a cell. It's got little head figurines adorning the walls. It's got a nice lit atmosphere, and the cell itself is very nice and very cushioned luxury. And Giorno actually sees the cell is empty, which kind of interests him a little bit, because he sees the cell. It's separated from him by a plate of glass, but he goes into the visitor's hall for the cell, and and he doesn't see Polpo himself. All he sees is an empty room with a bed in it. He sees an empty cell. He does see an empty cell with a bunch of things adorning it, and there's even a bed in there, and a quite nice one at that. But Giorno doesn't see Polpo himself and is a little confused as to why Polpo isn't in there. But then Giorno hears a voice, and the voice tells him that accurately observes that Giorno seems to have injured his left hand, his left arm, and case in point, we find out that the bed itself is indeed Polpo, and that he was actually, for whatever reason, disguising himself as a bed. He just unfolds himself, and it's revealed that Polpo is a very big dude. So, yeah, Giorno is about the size of your normal guy. He's about, I don't know, like 5-6 feet. He's somewhere in that range. Polpo is easily double that, and easily twice the size as well. He's a big, fat dude. He's like really big, really tall, and Giorno is a little surprised by his appearance at first, but he does answer Polpo's questions honestly, pointing out that yes, he did indeed injure his arm, and that he had to help carry his bag in his less dominant arm to actually go through security check until recently. And Polpo does point out that he figured as much, and then proceeds to offer Giorno a drink and a snack from his little mini fridge that he apparently also has in his cell. And Giorno declines, pointing out that he wasn't allowed to be given or taken anything. Although Polpo remarks that that's a little bit hypocritical, and then proceeds to open a secret panel in his cell to reveal that the guards have indeed given him a bunch of stuff. And that it really isn't that much of a big deal, because obviously people are a lot more different behind closed doors. At which point Giorno finally understands why Polpo doesn't leave prison, because he's big and could easily mess somebody up if he wanted to, but B, he effectively lives a life of luxury within prison. He doesn't have to work or do anything. He literally just sits there all day eating junk food and just lays about in his cell all day. He doesn't need to do anything. But in any case, after Polpo remarks about Giorno's injuries, he then proceeds to start the interview for Giorno to actually join Passione. And then proceeds to ask Giorno what his skills actually are. And Giorno just tells him outright that he can actually steal, that he's actually really good at sleight of hand and can actually steal things without people noticing. Case in point, when the guard went to go pat him down, he stole her wallet and some of her money. Although he does remark that he will return it later. But then also remarks that he has no other skills other than the fact that he can fold his ear inside of his head, which amuses Polpo. But Polpo then proceeds to remark that that's not really enough of a test for him. And then as he's talking, he notices that Giorno notices that he actually seems to bite his finger, but when the clock in Polpo's cell goes off, his fingers are suddenly fine, and Giorno then proceeds to wonder if this guy is indeed a stand user. And we'll get to that, but after wondering whether or not he's a stand user, he realizes that he needs to hide the fact that he's a stand user from Polpo if he wants to actually pass the interview. At which point Polpo reveals that he actually has prepared a test for Giorno to actually see if he's trustworthy or not, since, as he points out, that is the biggest thing for a gangster to be trustworthy. And with that, he then prepares the test. He actually has a lighter that he tells Giorno will actually not go out over the next 24 hours. And Giorno's job is to just make sure the lighter doesn't go out for the next 24 hours. That's all he has to do to actually prove himself trustworthy to the gang. And obviously that's easier said than done, because as Polpo later explains, literally anything could blow it out, and he has to be diligent and careful. But as Polpo explains, literally anything could put the lighter out, and Giorno has to be diligent to make sure that the lighter doesn't go out while he's trying to perform his test. At which point Giorno takes the lighter very carefully so he doesn't put it out, by the way. And Polpo sends him on his merry ways, telling him that his 24 hours have begun and that from now on he has to be diligent to make sure the lighter doesn't go out. At which point Giorno proceeds to get ready to leave and go out of the prison, only to discover that he actually has to go through a pat down again. And case in point, Polpo didn't pay off the guards. Giorno was operating under the impression that Polpo paid off the guards so that he could easily escape with the lighter, but as it turns out, no. The guards are completely unaware that Polpo gave Giorno a lighter. And Giorno has to get pretty creative to actually get the lighter out of the prison. So first and foremost, what he does is he actually hides the lighter and the flame inside his hand so that it A, doesn't go out, and B, isn't noticeable during a pat down. And while that does initially satisfy the female guard, she does note that Giorno seems to be clenching his fist around something and asks him to open it, reiterating the fact that he wasn't allowed to take anything with him. So Giorno opens up his hand to reveal a flower, and the guard lets him go on his merry way. As it turns out, Giorno used his stand to turn the lighter into a flower so that he could actually escape the prison without alerting any of the guards that he had a lighter with him. And then proceeds to leave the prison. Shortly after turning the lighter back into a lighter. With that, he then proceeds to go back to his dorm room and is prepared to just let the lighter sit on his nightstand for the next 24 hours and keep it safe. And also while he's on his way through, he actually sees a soccer squad who are posing for a picture and asks Giorno to actually take the picture, but he refuses because he has to watch the lighter. And also he's asked by a janitor to watch assist him with carrying some of his stuff, but again, Giorno refuses because he has to watch the lighter. At which point Giorno successfully makes it back to his dorm room and lets out a sigh of relief, only to panic when he realizes that he almost put the lighter out by breathing a sigh of relief. At which point Giorno quickly realizes that he actually needs to find a way to keep the lighter from falling over, and noticing a piece of bread on his desk with a bunch of stationery lying around, he comes up with an idea. He hauls out a piece of bread, sticks the lighter in it, moves the lighter to the back of his dresser, and then just surrounds it with a bunch of stuff on his desk so that the lighter actually doesn't go out by accident. And consent with the fact that the lighter will never go out because A, it'll never fall over, and B, no wind will actually be able to hit it because it's surrounded by stuff. He then proceeds to check the window to make sure that it won't accidentally blow open and blow out the lighter. But as he's doing that, the door suddenly opens and without his knowledge or consent because somebody's coming into his room without him knowing. And after seeing the mirror near his door that it's actually Koichi, he ducks out the window and hides on the gutter outside to make sure that Koichi doesn't see him. And as it turns out, the reason Koichi is there is because, well, a long story short, the only thing Giorno wasn't able to sell was his passport, Koichi's passport. So Koichi came looking for it, and because he figured that out as well. And in the scene, Giorno admits via his inner dialogue that he actually was planning to give the passport back to Koichi, but he didn't have an opportunity to yet. But also realizes that there's actually a bit of a problem because if Koichi sees the lighter, he's likely going to put it out by accident. And then Giorno's test will likely be over because of that. So because of that, Giorno then proceeds to concoct an idea on how to actually get the lighter safely away from Koichi without him noticing. So what he does is he uses gold experience to actually turn the light fixture above his desk into a snake. He transforms it into a snake, knowing full well that the snake will go after the bread and get the lighter out of Koichi's eyesight. But the snake accidentally burns itself. And winds up dropping the lighter with the bread with the lighter in it back on the table. And Koichi notices the lighter and then proceeds to pick it up and then Giorno swiftly proceeds to panic because he realizes now that Koichi is likely going to put out the lighter by accident because he doesn't know what it is. But before Koichi could do that, he actually notices something is burning in Giorno's in one of Giorno's stationary folder things. And after opening it up, discovers that his passport, while somewhat on fire, is still very much around. And as Koichi tries to put it out, Giorno makes his move and swipes the lighter without Koichi seeing it. And satisfied about having successfully avoided the close call, Giorno then proceeds to go back down the stairs to the main campus where he is. I'm not entirely sure where he lives. I think he lives in some sort of boarding house. But in any case, as he's going down the stairs, he then perceives that it was too close and that he needs to be a bit more careful. But as he's going out the stairs, he actually runs into the janitor again, and the janitor accidentally puts out the lighter. So yeah, Giorno because of that begins to panic because he realizes he fails his test, and the janitor actually expresses his condolences, pointing out that he didn't mean to put the lighter out. But then proceeds to test the lighter to see if it's actually still working. And as it turns out, and much to Giorno's surprise and concern, the lighter's flame is out, but it's still very much giving off gas. As the janitor is quick to point out, because he can actually hear the gas coming out of the thing. And sure enough, when he lights it again, it does make a huge fireball initially, which the janitor admits does startle him a little bit, but the lighter is still very much in working form, and then hands it back to Giorno. And Giorno is again concerned and a little bit confused, because as he points out via his internal dialogue, the test was that the lighter didn't go out. If the lighter went out at any point in the past 24 hours, that was it. So he's a little confused as to how the lighter could still be lit. But he doesn't really have much time to process that, because at that exact moment, a stand shows up. And this stand is heavily implied to be Polpo's stand, and also implied to be an automatic stand because it proceeds to attack the janitor, because he's the one who actually turned the lighter back on. And Giorno quickly realizes that this was Polpo's test, that Polpo's stand will come after anybody who puts the lighter out and tries to relight it. Case in point, it attacks the janitor and rips out his soul, and then proceeds to yell at him for relighting the lighter, and tells him that at this point he has two choices: either he can die or become one of its chosen, quote unquote. And then proceeds to open its mouth to reveal that there is indeed a stand arrow inside. So yeah, Polpo somehow got a hold of a stand arrow, but gave it to his stand to presumably create new stand users. Presumably, and that's likely how his test is actually conducted. Case in point, the stand actually attacks Polpo with its stand arrow. Actually attacks the janitor with its stand arrow, and the man dies. His soul is pierced by the stand arrow, and though his body shows no visible harm, he dies. And Giorno then picks up his lifeless body and is curious as about exactly what happened. But Giorno doesn't really have much time to actually think things over, because as he steps into the shadows, the stand suddenly turns his attention to him, and then proceeds to attack him as well, and that's where the episode ends. Overall, this episode is just kind of the start of Giorno's journey. He goes in to actually meet with Polpo and actually join the organization. He goes in to join Passione, and the person in charge of giving him a test actually gives him a lighter to test, but he fails the test, and in the process summons Polpo's stand. So yeah, very interesting episode. For the most part, the lighter wasn't really important. Apparently the lighter wasn't very important to the test, though, because as implied, this stand is indeed automatic and likely would have attacked anybody who put the lighter out. So that's probably why Polpo told him not to put the lighter out, because he knew his stand would attack Giorno if he did. So obviously that was the whole test. Obviously, if Giorno was indeed trustworthy, he would have kept the lighter going no matter what. And wouldn't have tried to relight it. And Polpo knew this because he knew that his stand was bound to the lighter and would have been summoned if Giorno had lit the lighter at all. So that's how Polpo conducts his test on him. But I am interested to see how the stand actually works, because obviously it's an automatic stand, which means it'll target anybody who relights the lighter. But also interestingly, when Giorno steps in the shadows, the stand proceeds to attack him. So I'm interested to see how the stand actually works. I'm assuming it has some sort of thing related to shadows, and it's actually going to do something with that, because obviously that connection with shadows is very interesting and weird, and obviously there's got to be something related to that. But for right now, that's gonna do it for my review of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Golden Wind. What did you guys think? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below, or over on my Discord server, link in the description. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, be sure to follow me on Twitter in the description below. If you want to keep up to date with what's going on the channel, then Twitter's the best way to do that. Also, be sure to check out my Patreon in the description below as well. If you want to help support me, then my Patreon is the best way to do that. If you do indeed help support me through that, then you will actually be listed on my website. It's only a couple bucks a month, and it helps me out. So you guys get access to a bunch of cool perks in addition to being listed on my website. So be sure to go check those out. Also, be sure to check out my Twitch. I stream every Sunday, 2:30 Eastern Standard Time. So if you want to go see that, by all means, go ahead. And finally, if you want to see more content from me, then be sure to check out the videos linked in the end screen. The top video is the most recent video. It may or may not be this one. Whereas the bottom video is the video recommended to you based on what you've already seen from me. So if you want to try something new or see more of what you like, then be sure to check both of those videos out. But regardless of whether or not you do any or all of those things, thank you guys so much for watching. And until next time, I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.